Thanks, Joan Collins. Taoiseach, I want to raise an issue that arose just before Christmas. 2 weeks ago, I raised a question with the Minister for Housing in relation to a family in Crumlin facing possible homelessness. The family with 2 children, one of whom has autism, had been renting the same house for 18 years. The landlord wanted to sell, and because of his relationship with the family, approached Dublin City Council to offer them the property for sale. He wanted to keep the family in their home. He was told no, that the council are not acquiring properties as before. Councillor Pat Dunn followed this up with the housing manager, and he was told that due to directives from the minister in December, that DCC were prohibited from buying the property. In his reply to my question, the minister said he was keen that local authorities and approved housing bodies avoid competing with potential private purchasers for available properties. Now, I just want to say that fortunately, I just heard today that Dublin City Council has agreed to buy the property, exercising their discretion. But this reversal of the policy of encouraging local authorities and approved housing bodies to buy housing stock instead of building directly would make sense if the state was actually building the required level of public housing. But that's not happening, Taoiseach. And in the midst of a homeless crisis, that is a blunt, crude measure which could have resulted in a family being made homeless as a direct consequence of a government directive. Homelessness is on the rise, up 14% since May 2021. There are 9,099 people in emergency accommodation in November, which included 2,548 children. And according to Simon, communities, only 11% of rental properties were available in December who accepted HAP, not ring-fenced, but accepted HAP. That is 148 out of 1,350 across 16 areas, including major cities. Now, Taoiseach, the concern of the Minister is that local authorities and approved housing bodies buying up properties were partly responsible for squeezing people out of the market. But the real issue is the role of institutional investors, yet government policy is to encourage such investors. An update for Housing for All states the Department of Housing are engaging with institutional investors to encourage sustainable investment in residential accommodation. Of the 12 billion needed to build 33,000 a year target in Housing for All, 10 billion is expected to come from the private sector. This reliance on the private sector, the policy to effectively stop building public houses from the 1980s, is the root of the housing and homelessness crisis. The targets in Housing for All are not being met either by the private sector or the local authorities and approved housing bodies. In total, 20,400 houses were built in 2021, 12,000 below the target, as happened in both 2020 and 2019. That is a total of 36,000 houses below target in 3 years. Between 2017 and 2020, the total of social housing stock only rose by less than 10,000. Again, the Housing for All target is to build 9,000 social housing units a year, but in the first 3 quarters of last year, just 3,144 were built, but actually 2/3 of these were not new builds, but bought from private developers. The situation is a mess, Taoiseach, and the people suffering most are those such as the family in Crumlin who are facing homelessness, and many other families who could be facing homelessness in the future. Will you and your Minister change the directive to the local authorities and ensure families and individuals do not face eviction into homelessness and make a specific priority acquisition for these circumstances?
Thank you, Deputy Collins.
Well, first of all, I thank the Deputy for raising the issue, and I'm glad that that particular family's situation has been resolved with DCC now facilitating the purchase of the house. You did say, I think, that there were 2 children with special needs in the house, so common sense and flexibility should always apply in situations like this, and councils have flexibility. So, for example, the target this year is 12,000 social homes for 2022, of which 9,000 is a direct build between approved social housing bodies and local authorities. Now, I can recall a year ago, longer people saying local authorities are not building enough social housing. I said it myself when I was in opposition. Local authorities, we want local authorities building houses as the core activity in terms of housing provision, along with approved social housing bodies. I'm talking in the context of social housing now. We don't want acquisition to be the alternative to local authorities building their own and getting houses built. That's the point. So from a policy orientation point of view, the clear message to local authorities has to be your route to social housing provision primarily is through construction, either by you as a local authority or by approved social housing body. In certain circumstances there can be acquisitions, and there's the phasing out of the leasing situation, which has been ongoing for some time and which does help in respect of homelessness and immediate issues that you've just raised there. There has to be that flexibility when situations present themselves to councils in respect of particular families or a particular set of circumstances. The councils could respond flexibly. That has to be there. In addition, 4 billion of state funding will be provided for housing, both social affordable, cost rental, per annum for the duration of the plan. In addition to that 4 billion, 10 billion is required, it's estimated to be required in terms of the private house developments that will be needed. And we do need private sector investment in addition to the public sector investment to get to the 33,000 completions a year that we want to get to. Now, in your presentation, I think you omitted the reality of the pandemic and its impact on house building. You said that the targets weren't met in 2020. Well, that's obvious because of the prolonged lockdown in 2020. The same happened in 2021 with a prolonged lockdown, unfortunately, because of the Alpha variant for up to 3 to 4 months. And that did impact both on the public sector outputs in terms of house building and in terms of private sector house building. Now, it did make a good recovery in the latter half of the year, and there were 31,000 commencements in 2021, and about 38,000 planning permissions granted. So the pipeline is getting much better. It's not a mess at all now. It's getting much better, and we can see clear visibility now in terms of both social housing pipeline and in terms of private housing. The Land Development Agency has been established on a statutory basis. It now has a number of key projects ready to go, and it's also developed Project Tussig, which is working with developers and developments in terms of projects that were lying sort of dormant, even though they had planning permission.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
The LDA is in there to activate those, to get houses built and get them built fast so that the people who need housing can get housing.
Taoiseach, just for clarity, I made the point that 20,400 houses were built in 2021. That's 12,000 below the target, as happened in both 2020 and 2019 before the pandemic. So just for clarity on that. But really my question is in relation to this directive. Dublin City Council obviously didn't get clarity. There was no real clarity that they could intervene into these situations now. I outlined the situation with the family to the Minister, that they're going to be facing homelessness. He came back and said, I'm keen that local authorities and approved housing bodies avoid competing with potential private purchase for available properties. And he raised about specific priority acquisitions, one-bedroom units to deliver for housing first, etc. And at the end of it, he said, I understand that Dublin City Council has informed my department that as a property referred to by the Deputy does not fall under the priority categories for acquisitions, it is not in a position to acquire it at this time. Now, if that's what the Dublin City Council were reading from that directive, then there's a huge danger that that could be happening and replicating all around the country. So I'm asking you to intervene and clarify that directive for the local authorities, that the specific purpose acquisition should be also families and people facing homelessness to evictions.
Well, obviously, I haven't seen the detail of the particular case, but what you read out there was that the Council said to the Minister that they didn't feel it came within the priorities. There was an issue there in terms of why they didn't feel that. But subsequently, they've clearly do know. They clearly do know. I can appreciate that, and it has happened, which is good for the family. But remember the debate here almost a year ago on acquisitions. People in this House wanted ordinary people to be able to buy houses in estates without being outbidded by the councils, without being outbidded by institutions. And the Minister took, no, but that's the rationale behind the general policy. We don't want individual couples or individuals on their own competing with a council all of the time in terms of buying a house. That's the balance has to be achieved here. The primary focus we want from local authorities is to concentrate on getting social houses built directly. We need more house building on all fronts. Private sector, we need the agencies like the Land Development Agency we need local authorities, we need approved social housing body. They all need finance in different guises to enable financial capacity to go behind what will be a massive house building programme for the next 10 years.
Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Minister, about that.
Yes, I'll talk to the Minister
Thank you
about
very
what you
much.
raised.
That concludes